I thought it might be a good idea to start this morning with a little bit of a game, okay? A bit of interaction going on. It's a word game, and it's really, really simple. There are prizes up for grabs, and all you need to do is I'm going to read out some famous quotes, and your job is to yell out to me not the minute you realize, once I've finished reading it, who said that quote. So it's going to be pretty famous. And the prize is, we've got this little fun-sized Mars bar. I'm kidding. There's nothing fun about this size whatsoever. You get a proper-sized Mars bar. Okay? The only requirement is you must wait till I finish my sentence before you yell it out to make it nice and fair. We're clear on the rules? We good? All right. First one. We'll start off with an easy one. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Someone, was it here? Someone said it. Oh, lots of people are putting their hand up. Are you ready? Neil Armstrong, 1969. Man on the moon. You ready? Everyone else around him, be ready as well. We good? Okay, next one. Well done. Next one. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Someone down here. Martin Luther King. Yes, civil rights activist. Next one. A bit closer to home, this one. Any boss who sacks a worker for not turning up today is a bum. Someone here? Yes. Bob Hawke, that's right, when we won the America's Cup for you. Beautiful. This one for the younger generation. You might get this one. Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods? I haven't finished yet. Are we in the clear yet? 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 Good. Are we out of the woods yet? Are we? And so on and so on. Someone did yell it over here very excitedly. Who was that? Down here? There you go. From her big hit a few years ago titled Out of the Woods, of course. Last one, a bit more serious. I am the Eggman. They are the Eggmen. I am the Walrus. Goo goo gajoob. Someone said it over here early, but I'll give it to you anyway. I would have accepted John Lennon or the Beatles. Who was it? Yes, over here. And there you go. Well done. Who got 5 from 5 in your head anyway? Maybe didn't get a Mars bar. Dave Hack did, of course. Hey, so words. Words are pretty memorable. Hey, we remember when people say stuff. And words have a lot of power. Words have the power to build trust and to make promises and build hope. Or they have the power to bring destruction and war. And this morning I want to talk to you about 2 words in particular. 2 words that started a movement and changed human history forever. 2 words that changed some men's perspective and their purpose and their position in life, and then went on to do the same for others, and their legacy still lives on today. 2 words that mean all-out dedication, true commitment, and a new way of life. And when these 2 words are put together, and they're spoken out of the right mouth, contain so much power and can mean so much. And those 2 words, those 2 really simple words, follow me. You see, when Jesus said these words, things happened. When Jesus said these words, people moved. When Jesus said these words, a whole revolution began. Let me take you back to the New Testament, the Bible, where Jesus first spoke these words, and we'll see what happened. We'll find ourselves in the book of Matthew, the first book of the New Testament. And it reads, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. And they were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and they followed him. Jesus called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. Then we move ahead to the book of Mark, chapter 2. And it says, once again, Jesus went out beside the lake, and a large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at a tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. Then we go to the last verse in the book of John. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee, finding Philip, and he said to him, follow me. Now I'm just going to stop after these verses and let's acknowledge this incredible phenomenon that we're witnessing here. You see, here Jesus is calling them, and we can sometimes look at this story and go, well, no big deal. I'd follow Jesus too. But you see, we in 2017, we actually have the luxury of knowing the whole story. Yeah? We know the end of the story. And sometimes when you know the end of the story, it's actually pretty easy to get your head around the beginning of the story. But what if you didn't know the end of the story? See, what Jesus is doing here is he's convincing these men to drop everything they know, their security and their comfort and their family, everything they know and love, with no promises of fame and fortune. No promises that, hey, in 2,000 years' time from now, you're going to have churches and buildings and schools named after you. No promises that the things you're going to do and the things you're going to say are going to be put in the Bible and people are going to be talking about it forever. None of that. Jesus is convincing these men on a sales pitch of 2 words: to drop everything they love and to follow him. So what was the power in those 2 words? And I figure if we as a faith community here at Riverview are going to talk about what it looks like to be Jesus followers and be fully devoted, I thought it would be a good idea to actually talk about today what it is to be a Jesus follower. What was the significance in those words when he said it? What did Jesus mean when he said, "Follow me"? And how does that apply to us today in 2017? You see, our language has changed over time, hey? You see, when we hear the word following nowadays, sometimes our thought process can go straight to Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever your social media platform preference is, because on that, we can follow someone so passively with zero commitment with the click of a button. So easy. You know, on Facebook, you can actually, I'm sure some people here have done this just quietly. You can friend someone on Facebook, but you can choose not to follow them so you don't find out what's going on in their world. So we can actually opt to be someone's friend, but not even follow what's going on in their world. It's so easy, and there's zero commitment involved. And that's where our thought process can sometimes go. Great example. Who can tell me, for this amazing little fun-sized Mars bar that I happen to have sitting up here, who can tell me who is the most popular person on Twitter? Who has the most followers? It's a female. I'll give you a clue. Oh, he said that, Katy Perry. Are you one of those followers? Oh, you said that very quickly. Beautiful, there you go. You see, Katy Perry has over 100 million followers on Twitter. That's amazing, 100 million people. And I wonder, how many of those followers are all out committed, all out dedicated, and willing to get involved in her life? Well, there's probably a few, but they're probably hindered by their restraining orders that have been put out. But it's not all of them. Jesus didn't have millions. Jesus only had 12. And those 12 changed the trajectory of humanity forever. You see, when Jesus said that phrase, "Follow me," he meant something completely different back then. So let me just take you back to the first century real quick so we can grab a little bit of context. So back then, every Hebrew boy growing up in the Jewish culture wanted to be a rabbi. And a rabbi was the teacher of the scriptures, or the law, as they called it. And the rabbi was the authority figure in that community. Everybody looked up to the rabbi. It was the coolest thing to be of the day. And only the best of the best of the best of the best got to do it. If you were a rabbi, you were top of the social hierarchy ladder because of your elite status. So these little boys growing up, of course, seeing that happen and wanting to be that, all wanted to be a rabbi. So they all had an opportunity to do that. So at about 4 or 5, all the little Hebrew boys would go to school. And the first level of school that they went to was memorizing the Old Testament scriptures, word for word, whole books. Our Riverview kids have trouble remembering one memory verse. These guys were remembering whole books. They'd memorize the prophets and all the prophets' writings. And as time went on and as the years went on, if the kid couldn't keep up with the expectation, and as the levels got harder and harder and harder, and the group of kids grew smaller and smaller and smaller, a rabbi would come up to them and say to them, "I'm sorry, you're not making the grade. You don't have what it takes to work in the ministry. You need to go and work in your father's trade." So time would go on, and that group would just shrink as people would be told, "You're not good enough. You need to go and do something else." And then when that group was really small, and all that was remaining was the best of the best of the best kids, at about 12 years old, the rabbis would start to handpick their disciples. And they'd walk around the school while the students were literally learning, and they'd walk around the school and they'd say to themselves, the rabbis would go, "Who here can do what I do? Who here has what it takes to be the best of the best of the best? Who here could not just do what I do, but do better than what I could do. And when they found their chosen and they found their one that they were going to take on in this journey, they'd walk up to the little boy and they'd say, "Follow me." And that boy would literally stand up and start to follow that rabbi. And that boy would become that rabbi's disciple. And he would submit all authority to this rabbi. He would take on everything he knew about the scriptures. He would take on his interpretations of the scripture. You know, disciples would even look up to their rabbi so much, they'd copy their walk and their talk and their mannerisms, and they'd do everything they possibly could to make sure they were exactly like their rabbi. And the rabbi's job was to teach a disciple to be exactly like them, continuously testing them and asking them questions so they can be just like him. Every boy growing up wanted to hear those words, "Follow me," because it meant that you were good enough. It meant that you were chosen. And these are the two words that these Hebrew men heard that day. Now we can come to the conclusion that because they weren't rabbis, they were fishermen, they were there was a tax collector in there. We know that they'd never heard those elusive words before said to them, "Follow me." They'd only ever heard the sentence, "I'm sorry, you don't have what it takes to work in the ministry. Go and work in your father's trade." And here he is, Jesus, the Lord, the teacher, the rabbi of second chances, coming along to them and saying, "Hey, I pick you. Follow me. Come and learn from me. Come and live with me. Come and lead like me. Come and love me." These are the words that these men had wanted to hear their whole life growing up. And Jesus is giving them their second chance. So of course they took it. Why wouldn't they? You see, when Jesus comes along and says, "Follow me," that's what he means. He means, I choose you. He says, learn from me, talk like me, think like me, become like me, take on my life as yours. And Jesus wanted all that commitment from his disciples. You know, in the New Testament and the Gospels, there's stories of people coming up to Jesus and going, "Hey, I want to follow you." And Jesus was very upfront and honest with them about the commitment. And it was very upfront with the cost that it was going to take to their personal life. To one guy he came up and asked, he said, "You're going to have to sell everything that you own." To another guy that came up, he said, "Hey, you're not going to have a proper home anymore. I hope you're okay with that." And to other guys who wanted to follow Jesus, but just said, "Let me just say goodbye to my family first, or let me just hang around them a little bit longer," Jesus would say, no, there's no time for that. You need to come and follow me right now. And here's a real gut check verse when we talk about the cost of following Jesus. In the book of Luke, just after he finished his teaching, he turned to the crowd, so he just turned to everyone who was around there, and he said this. He said, "If you want to be my disciple, you must hate everyone else by comparison. Your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple." Whew, that's a big verse, eh? Now, I want you to hear this and hear this really clearly. In these responses that Jesus had to these men, and what he said here, he's not saying to us we need to hate our mum and dad. And he's not saying to us we need to sell everything we own. He's not telling us we need to disown our family. And he's not saying we're going to be homeless. You see, what Jesus was doing in that particular moment, he was speaking directly into their hearts. He knew what they were clinging on to. He knew what they were idolizing and holding on to too tightly. And what he was honestly telling them and earnestly speaking to their hearts, saying, "Hey, if you want to follow me, I need to be enough." He says, if everything else in your world falls away and disappears and breaks down, I need to be enough. Now we can look at these scriptures and look at these stories and ask the question, well, is this prescriptive or is it simply descriptive? Is it prescribing what it takes for us to be a disciple now? Or is it simply describing what it was like to be a disciple back then? Well, I think it's prescriptive. You see, when we follow Jesus and become his disciple, he wants all of us. Yeah. He's saying to us, I need to be enough. And you know what? Jesus knows what we cling to. He knows what we idolize. He knows with our individuals what we hold on to too tightly. And he's saying to us, hey, if everything else falls away, I need to be enough. Are you prepared to drop everything and follow me? And some of us in here right now aren't following Jesus purely because you haven't heard the call yet. You haven't had the opportunity. You didn't even know there was an invitation from Jesus to follow him. So why would you be following him? And there's probably some people in here right now who know about Jesus and understand the concept of him, but you're kind of in a believing phase right now. And if you're honest with yourself, you're pretty comfortable there. Things are going okay. You believe the promises, but you're not really living it out and following actively. Or maybe some of us in here right now think that believing actually is following. Well, it's not. You see, by definition, one is very passive and doesn't require you to actually do anything just to believe. But to follow is an active word. It makes you commit and actually do something. So knowing there's different perspectives here, and knowing there's different people here coming from all different places and different values, knowing that, and also knowing that, hey, following Jesus sounds like there's a bit of a cost involved. There's a commitment. It involves some radical following. You might want to ask the question, well, why would I want to be all in? Why would I want to follow Jesus if there is such a cost? And that's actually a good question to ask. And it's an honest question to ask. But for me, the answer is easy. It's because Jesus brings life. Really simple. You see, when we follow Jesus, we gain life. Jesus puts it like this. He says in the book of John, chapter 10, verse 10, he says, I have come to this earth so that they might have life, and life to the full. Some translations will call it abundant life. Now, I'm going to just burst your bubble straight away. So before you start thinking of, abundant life, mansions and cars and boats and money and perfect health and everything that you put into that category of abundant life, it's really good to understand what Jesus meant when he says abundant life, because it's what he promises us. So it's good to actually know what it is. You see, we were created to be a true and whole human. When God created humanity, the Bible says he looked at what he created and said, it is very good. And Jesus was that true human. And when we take on Jesus' life as ours, we live in him. So when we live in him, we actually begin to live the way we were created to live in the first place, in an intimate relationship with our Heavenly Father, made right with God and forgiven. A life with purpose and with meaning, and a life with fulfillment. A life that is eternal. A life that is redeemed and renewed and restored. And it doesn't mean that when you begin to follow Jesus and we live in him, that your circumstances change, because they don't sometimes. Situations will stay the same, but guess what? You change. You are absolutely transformed. And I remember when I actually changed. I grew up in a Christian home, and I had a beautiful Christian family, and I went to church my whole life and accepted Christ into my heart at a young age and was baptized at 12 years old. But if I was really honest, I wouldn't call myself a devout follower. I was how you'd probably call it like a passive believer. So I lived that way my teenage years and got married at a pretty young age at 21 to my beautiful wife, Emma. And we decided, and looking back, it was a bit of a God prompting, we decided to leave our current church and we said, we're going to start this new chapter as a married couple in a different church. So we went to a different church, the local church here in Perth, and one of our very first services, we were there. I wasn't expecting anything to happen, and service started as per usual, and the message went on as per usual. And then after the message, the pastor who was preaching gave an opportunity to respond, an opportunity to make a commitment or a recommitment, very similar to what I'm going to do a little bit later on this morning. Now, like I said, I wasn't expecting anything to happen. I wasn't planning on anything to happen because I was a passive believer. I was just sitting there just waiting for everything to go on. But God had a surprise for me that Sunday morning. And I remember sitting there. And this was a long time ago, but I remember like it was yesterday. I remember sitting there and hearing the call to respond from the pastor, and God just starting to twist something, churn something in my heart. I started crying. I don't know why, just kind of bawling my eyes out. And I heard this as close to an audible voice as I'll ever hear, and I haven't heard this like this ever before since then. And it was God speaking directly into my heart. And I was crying, there were tears coming out, and God said to me, Beau, he said, you don't know what your plans are, which is true. I had no idea. And he said, but I do. So simple, yet so significant. See, in that moment, I was pretty lost spiritually. And just for God to say, Beau, I got your back. And in that moment, I actually knew my journey. Well, I didn't know in that moment. I know now. My journey began. He changed something inside of me. And of course, my luck, the response moment for that particular service was get up out of your chair and walk down the front for prayer. They don't do that all the time, but this was the weekend they did that. So of course I had no other opportunity but to respond in that. And I knew that my journey began. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know how anything was going to happen, but I do know that my journey began that day. And I know I changed because I remember the next day, and again, it's weird the details you remember. Such a long way down the track. I remember waiting, I was catching up with Emma for lunch the very next day on the Monday, and she was late, and I was waiting outside, and I was in there just on a street corner, and I was looking at the buildings and trees and people going past, this normal life going by. I remember just standing there, and I'm well aware this is going to sound very cheesy and very cliched, but I don't care because it's the only human words I can find to actually explain it. Everything actually I was looking at seemed brighter and seemed clearer, and my posture was different, and I actually felt like I had some hope, and I felt like I had some worthiness and some value, and I felt like I had meaning to my life. I can't describe it into human words, but I remember that moment just standing there thinking something's different. My circumstances hadn't changed at all. Everything else was exactly the same, but I had changed. He had actually changed me from the inside out. I didn't know what came next, but I was trusting and following Jesus that he was going to let me know what was going to happen next. Now, it doesn't mean when we make that decision to follow Jesus that we don't make mistakes, because we do make mistakes. I did make mistakes, and I still do make mistakes. But it's in those mistakes, and it's in those unhealthy choices, and it's in that confusion and getting lost sometimes, and in the mess of life that we can sometimes make ourselves. It's in that mess that we find Jesus' love and his forgiveness and his grace and his compassion and mercy that enables us to keep on track, and that enables us to keep following and enables us to keep on mission. Because let's be honest, as disciples of Christ, we've got a mission. We've got a track we have to do, right? We have to actually do something and move in a forward direction. You see, after Jesus' life on earth and his death and his burial and his resurrection, and just before he was about to go back up into heaven to be with his dad again, he said to the disciples, he gave them a little bit of a message, and he said, preach to the nations. And he said, you are disciples, now go and make more disciples. And he promised he'd be with them to the very end of age, making disciples of Jesus. That's our job. Not disciples of a concept, we're not disciples of a church. We're not disciples of another person, but disciples of him. Super simple. So what does that look like? What does following Jesus as a disciple look like for you? I don't know what it looks like for you. What it looks like for me is way different from what it looks like from all you. For some of you, it might actually mean traveling overseas like Josh and Christine. For others, it might mean working in your local mission field of your local community, in your occupation. For some of you, it might mean engaging large groups of people. For others, it might mean engaging one-on-one with your neighbor. I don't know what it looks like for you. But for all of us, it means outworking with his power who Jesus is, being his ambassador to others, to the one and to the many, to the rich and to the poor, to the old and to the young. And here's a real challenging one, to the popular and to the forgotten. You see, when we're disciples of Jesus and we're following him and we're representing him and we're taking on his life as ours, we actually need to go into places that need light. And you know what places need light? Dark places. And Jesus promises us, I will be with you to the end of age. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear this cost, and even just writing this message over the last few weeks, and I hear about the commitment required to follow Jesus, I'm challenged by this, if I'm going to be honest with you, amongst friends. I find this super challenging. And I can ask myself the question, am I really following Jesus? Or am I kind of creating my own path a little bit along the way? Am I really listening and obeying him? Or am I just a passive believer in this concept? I ask myself, do I love my kids like Jesus? Do I love my wife like Jesus? Do I respond to every situation and every person like a Jesus follower? You see, me, Beau, I've committed and pledged absolute allegiance to Jesus for the rest of my life. Do I act like it? I'm challenged by that. And I encourage you, if you are challenged by that also, just listen. Not to me, but to him. Pray. Speak to him. Have a conversation. Allow him to speak to you directly into your heart and let him know what he wants to say to you and where he wants to lead you. Read his word. Get some clarity on some things. It's his living word that he wrote for us. Gather with his people like we do right now. Have conversations. Worship. Loud moments of worship. Celebratory moments. Quiet times with God. Just spend time with him. Allow him to lead you. He'll show you the way. He's the best Lord. He's the best boss. He's the best teacher. And he wants to bring you life. And this invitation for life in him is for all of us. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, resurrected from the dead, never to die again, is inviting us to follow him. What an invitation. The question is, will you accept that invitation? Will you get out of the boat and follow? And just to close, I want to take you all the way back to the first century again. And there's an old Jewish blessing that they used to say back then in the first century in their community. And some people still say it, and you might have heard it along the way in your journey. But the blessing goes, may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. And you see, when a rabbi had his disciples and he had his little team and he had his group all formed, they'd walk everywhere together, of course. And in being a super dusty region, there was red dust everywhere. And the disciples would walk so closely behind their rabbi, and the rabbi would talk to them and ask them questions along the way, and they'd ask him questions along the way. And they'd have this discussion the whole time. Of course, he'd been his disciples. They would walk so closely behind him. They'd copy his steps, and they'd make sure they were with their rabbi all the time. And they walked so close to their rabbi that, of course, every time he stepped with his sandals, his dust would flick up behind him, and it would cover his disciples. And his disciples were covered from the waist down in this red dust from their rabbi. And they used to love that because it showed a proximity to their rabbi. If I had that dust on me, I'd want to tell people about it, right? You'd want to show it off. You'd be like, hey, check me out. See this dust that's on me? That's from my rabbi. That's actually how close I was to him. I've got his marks all over me. You wouldn't want to wash it off. You'd want to show it off to people. So my question to you, church, is whose dust do you have on you? What are you following, or who are you following so closely that its mark is on you for other people to see, and other people can see who or what your master is? Is it the dust of your family? You know, the way you were just brought up, and the teachings and the beliefs and the values, right or wrong, good or bad, now dictate how you lead your family and how you act? Or are you covered in the dust of your past experiences and your past hurts, allowing the unforgiveness and the resentment and the anger possibly and the bitterness, allowing it just to be on you? Or are you simply covered in the dust of culture? You're following its teachings and its way of life so closely, it's leaving its mark on you and you don't even realize it. Or Are you covered in the dust of your Rabbi Jesus? Allowing his humility and his love and his compassion and forgiveness and all that he is to flick back up on you so people can see who it is you follow. And not so people can see that on you at all, but so people can see him in you. Because you see, the dust of our Rabbi Jesus brings hope, and it brings life, and it brings freedom, and it brings forgiveness. And he wants to give that life to all of us. He wants us to believe, receive his life, and follow him.